So I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Tendayi Viki, who is an award-winning author and innovator. Tendayi has worked with leading global organizations, including Unilever, Salesforce, Pearson, Air France, Lufthansa. He's originally from Zimbabwe, but based in London. And Tendayi has just published his latest book, which is called Pirates in the Navy. And the title is a reference to a line from Steve Jobs, who famously said that it's more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. Essentially, I suppose what this book does is it looks to join those two aspects together to sort of say, what is it like to be a pirate who is in the Navy? It's really interesting. It's packed with insights, very, very accessible. And I've thoroughly enjoyed reading the book today. But one thing that struck me reading the book over the last few days, it strikes me that it's a very, very difficult thing to be a pirate, to be a successful pirate in the Navy, and that you have to be quite astute because there's an awful lot of forces ranged against you. Now, we'll move on in a few minutes to talk about how you might overcome that. But could you talk to me a little bit, first of all, about the resistance and the skepticism that typically you get if you're a pirate in the Navy?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, and thank you for having this conversation. So one of the things that's really interesting about successful organizations is that the way that you manage your success is to exploit your current opportunities, to manage efficiencies, and really invest in like tracking and business planning and road mapping. And all these are really, really great practices for managing a currently existing business. Now, when you try to do innovation inside large organizations, or you try to be a pirate in the Navy, the things that you're working on are not very easily managed by this way of doing business. And so the struggle, the resistance you face is that the tools that leaders currently use to sort of lead innovation and drive innovation are not fit for purpose. And so when innovation bumps up against these tools, then it's really difficult for people that are trying to do innovation to succeed inside organizations.
Yeah, you warn about the danger of innovation labs. You're not very much in favor of these things, and in some ways you sort of say that if you're working in one of these that that you might be actually at a bit of a disadvantage. You could be actually being set up for failure. I think you go as far as to suggest.
Yeah, so I'm not for or against innovation labs in particular. I'm for making sure that the work we do as innovators is connected to the main company, right? So one of the reasons why innovation struggles inside large organizations is because of this problem we just spoke about, where the tools are not fit for purpose. The decision that most innovators make is to say, okay, we're going to walk away from the organization and we're going to go work over there as far away as possible. But in my experience, and this is something I've seen over and over and over again, when people walk away from the organization and go work somewhere far away, the products and services they create over there, when it's time to get them ready for scale, because you then need a large investment from the mother company to scale these things you're working on. That is the point where they start to run into problems, because the stuff they're working on is not connected to the strategy that the large organization is trying to pursue. Nobody in the main company is really invested in these things succeeding. And so this disconnect is really what I speak against. So you can have an innovation lab as long as the innovation lab has built a bridge to the core business. If you have a bridge to the core business, you're much more likely to actually become successful.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But first of all, I just wanted to say to you that it strikes me that entrepreneurs can sometimes be their own worst enemies, that they tend to fall in love with their business ideas, regardless of whether they're actually successful or actionable. And they tend to talk an awful lot about innovation. So we get all this innovation rhetoric, the theater, the hackathon, all of that sort of thing, which isn't the same as actually putting innovation into practice.
Yes. So, I mean, the worst thing you can do is be a preacher without legitimacy. And that's the problem that most entrepreneurs have. They're preachers without legitimacy. They're talking about things they may have accomplished maybe in another organization, or maybe they used to work for a startup, or they're talking about things they've seen succeed in other companies. And when you're talking about Google and Amazon and Facebook, but you're working for a large pharmaceutical company, the leaders are much more likely to be skeptical. And so this sort of vanity, when you know something and you see something that other people don't see, you can become quite vain and quite egotistical as you try and make your point. But what you fail to realize is that nobody is supposed to listen to you. Like, you don't have a right to be listened to just because you're right doesn't mean that people have to listen to you. They have no reason to listen to you. And so what I say to entrepreneurs is, just like you're not Elon Musk, you don't work in a company full of idiots, lay down the tools of war and start thinking about how you can build credibility so that then the points that you're trying to make, can resonate much more with the leadership.
One of the really strong points coming out of the book is the need for innovators to be politically astute, to not operate in their own little vacuum, but to kind of reach out and to get stakeholder engagement. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the importance of that?
Yes. So the difference between an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur is being politically savvy. That is the entrepreneur's superpower. The really great serial innovators that make loads of new products and launch them within companies, they don't view the politics of large organizations as a burden. They actually relish the opportunity to sort of overcome all these obstacles. That's what they know, that's the job. So they actually thrive on building relationships. They thrive on ensuring that they're building connections, within the organization. And so one of the things our culture has been doing over the last decade or so is really celebrating entrepreneurs. The Mark Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, the Richard Bransons. And what that does is sometimes we start to communicate to entrepreneurs that they should be conducting themselves like entrepreneurs. And so we're kind of teaching behaviors that can sometimes be counterproductive, right? So the really great entrepreneurs know that, okay, I'm working on something new and groundbreaking and breakthrough, but I'm doing it in a traditional context. And the best way for me to succeed is to build alliances and coalitions within this context. And that will allow actually the stuff that I'm working on to be protected and then be able to go to scale.
I liked your observation in the book that, as you say here, the companies are not mechanical structures with fixed processes. They are organic and living things. And you talk about, not fighting the corporate machine, about actually working with people. So these are the skills that really are terribly important for entrepreneurs to learn.
Yes, really important for entrepreneurs to learn. I remember once I was working with a sort of a head of innovation. They were trying to drive transformation within the organization, but the way they did it was so confrontational that they in the end received a phone call from their boss, who was saying that one of his colleagues had received a complaint from his employee about the way that this entrepreneur had conducted themselves in a meeting. And then the entrepreneur was surprised that their boss was not protecting them from this. But actually, within an organization, what you want is for people to be saying positive things about you. It's hard enough to be an innovator without actually picking fights, because now you have people rooting for you to fail, and that's not something you really want to build within an organization.
Yeah, so it's about building coalitions, and you talk, I think, in the book about finding kind of almost like sponsors and early adopters, people who are really enthusiastic, and that you can get early wins with these people, and that you can try and build out from there. Yeah.
Yes. So the job of getting early wins is to build credibility. So one of my favorite stories is it's about Claudia Kochka. She used to work for P&G. And rather than go out there and try and like pontificate about design thinking, what she did was she took a stale brand, the Mr. Clean brand, and she focused on helping that brand become successful using design thinking. And that was an early adopter, right? So as she got success with that, that then created the momentum for other people to take an interest in it. So what you're actually trying to do is create gravity towards your movement, rather than, it's not, you're not a used car salesman. You're not pushing stuff on people, right? You're trying to bring people towards something that's much more valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, you actually say in the book, don't push things too soon. Try and move the needle. Is this a problem that you come across with innovators or entrepreneurs, that they're looking to change the world straight away, and they're not really giving it time?
Yes, it's almost like a human condition. We pay more attention to our detractors than we do to our supporters. Mm-hmm. We probably needed that to survive, from an evolutionary perspective. But it's really counterproductive inside organizations. We tend to start. I've watched a lot of entrepreneurs bump their heads against their detractors. They really feel the need to convince their detractors through conversation and talking. And sometimes they feel they can bombard them with aggressive statistics, data, whatever it is that they're using. I've never seen anyone succeed at doing that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just bumping your head against the wall. I've never seen anybody convince any leader that innovation is useful through conversation. It's more when the leader actually already gets it that you get traction. And those are the people you want to identify, your supporters, the early adopters. And when you work with those early adopters and get early wins, and then your detractors can see the wins, then you're much more likely to build people who actually convert to the movement, right? To say, okay, this is something we can do inside our organization.
And it's also important really to get buy-in from the leaders, because as you say in the book, the leaders are the ones who can give you guidance on what are the key things, what are the key metrics that are going to make this work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the question is your goal for the products and services that you're working on, the new stuff you're creating, is your goal to just work on cool stuff, or is your goal to make sure that the stuff you work on gets launched and then scaled within the organization? If the goal is for your stuff to be launched and scaled, because then that makes you a true innovator, you've actually done something with real impact, then you have no choice. You have to collaborate with leaders. And so when you collaborate with leaders, they then tell you what is important to the organization from a strategic point of view. What are the things that you're willing to scale? You know, where should you play? Where should you explore and actually test? And then if you bring those ideas to them, you actually have supporters, right?
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in the book actually that quite a few innovation labs have actually been shut down sort of quietly, and you referenced the fact that a lot of innovation theatre has gone on, and did you suspect that in some cases it's done for marketing and public relations reasons? And I think you came across an example there where an innovation lab was sponsored from the marketing and PR budget.
Yes.
This is presumably a real, but you've come across this, that organizations are actually shutting down, obviously not sending out press releases telling us all about it. This is going on, you found, yeah?
Oh yeah, this is going on quite a bit actually. There's a lot of organizations that are shutting down their innovation labs, or just like getting rid of their innovation teams, right? I have this survey that I run when I'm doing my workshops where I ask people, just think about your innovation team right now. Like, how easy would it be for your leaders to disband the team? Would it be as hard as getting rid of the finance department or the HR department? Or would it be as easy as getting rid of external consultants? And what I find is that they always say, oh man, when we really think about it, getting rid of our team is as easy as getting rid of external consultants. And so that's because the team never embeds itself inside the organization. The problem with innovation theater is that you're doing stuff that looks like innovation, but doesn't ultimately create value for the organization. So you're doing hackathons, you're doing sticky note stuff, you put up canvases, you're having events and speakers and all that. And then after a couple of years, people start asking, okay, we're funding that lab to the tune of $1 million a year. How much value have we got from it in terms of net new revenue? And if the answer is zero, or sometimes I hear, innovators say stuff like, well, we're working on culture, right? But the only reason culture change is valuable is to the extent that it actually creates value. We don't just change our culture because it's a cool thing to do. We change cultures because we know that working in a particular way increases value for the organization. So if we're not creating any value, ultimately, that's how we're ultimately judged. And a lot of innovators are unaware of this. Even though they refer to themselves as innovators, they're unaware that they get ultimately judged by the value they create. And so they're kind of working in this theater. And then in the end, when the ultimate judgment comes of what value have you created, and if the answer is none, then the lab is quietly shut down.
This is, of course, one of the dilemmas that you have, because innovators can either be in the business of trying to achieve transformation for the organization and turning it into a truly innovative organization with innovative design and processes, or else they can be in the business of kind of getting a bit of growth, launching a product that's maybe a product extension or something like this. And I think one of the things you're saying in the book is that in many ways you have to try and balance both of those elements. That, I imagine, is a very, very tricky thing to do.
Yes, I mean, so the ultimate, so here's the question that I often ask innovators, and it's a very kind of, it's a pretty rubbish metaphor, but I find that it works. So if I join a religion, let's say I become a Christian, well, how do you know I'm a Christian? Well, I'm a Christian because you start to see particular things that I do, ways I pray, attending church, whatever it is that I do, the outcomes that are created by the conversion. And so when innovators say they're driving transformation, well, what is the metric that the transformation has become successful? For innovation, the metric that the transformation has become successful is now you have 10 teams that are working on new products. You have leaders making incremental bets. you have those teams testing their ideas with customers, you have them making progress towards finding business models that work. Maybe you even have one or two ideas that have now been launched at scale. And you know that the company can now do that in a repeatable way. So you can't just say, I'm doing transformation, so I don't have to create value, right? There's no, because then what is the impact of the transformation? The transformation is pointed towards the creation of teams that are actually creating value. And so you can't dodge it. You have to do both, right? There's just no way to avoid that.
Yeah. Another piece of advice from the book is to try and learn from failure by seeking out maybe those who have tried and not succeeded in their innovation efforts. And you suggest that these people might actually be lurking in the corners of organizations. They may have been sidelined, but typically they're around somewhere, and you sort of say, respectfully seek them out and ask them for their advice. Tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so this one I learned when I was working in a large bank in South Africa. It's South Africa's largest bank, and when I was working with the head of innovation there, we suddenly realized that the people that had been trying to drive the same similar programs to what he'd been driving hadn't been actually fired. They'd just been like moved to other roles after their programs had failed. And so we were like, well, why are we just like not talking to them? Let's just like meet them for coffee and find out like what happened. Like where are all the bodies buried, right? Where are all the blockers? Who are the people that were really supportive to them when they were trying to do their effort? Can we leverage that support? And so, so sometimes we feel like we're alone, but often, there's nothing new under the sun. Usually someone has tried to do it before, right? So.
Of course, those running kind of organizations in terms of, say, the chief executives and the middle managers, they have to balance the process of running a successful organization, which may actually be doing fine on paper. The revenues, the metrics may look actually really, really good. And yet at the same time, they have to innovate, because in many ways, those business models we know are probably not sustainable. That's a very, very difficult sort of balancing act to do when a company looks successful, but you've got to sort of say, yeah, well, we look successful now. We're maybe not fit for purpose viewed through the future, maybe a year or 2 or 5 years down the line.
Yeah, I find that I'm actually finding that conversation is becoming easier and easier with organizations these days, right? My apologies for the little things. I'm finding that conversation is getting easier and easier with organizations these days, right? Leaders are now more and more aware of disruption, and that's simply because the life cycles of success are shrinking. 100 years ago, you could go for 50, 60 years on the same business model. These days, technology is like changing so rapidly. And then with COVID-19, that just really confirmed a few things. Like, it really revealed that some companies are not innovation ready. In some companies, this has become an accelerator for their success, and for other companies, become a massive disruptor. And so that's a easier conversation to have these days than it used to be. When I first started, leaders were like, "Yeah, but we're making loads of money already. Why do we need to be talking about this?" They'd even ask questions like, "Oh, that program that you're working on, how much money is it making? 3 million. Like, why are we talking about this? Like, our combined salaries here on the board are more than 3 million. So why are we talking about your project?" And so, that's something that leaders have been evolving towards. The question that they now have, which is why I wrote Pirates in the Navy, is, okay, we get you, we hear you. What do we now need to do to become successful? And if you turn up and you start showing them innovation theater and things that create no value, you give them the opportunity to say one more time, "Oh, okay, well, we tried the innovation thing and it didn't work. And so we're not going to try it again." And so that's one of the reasons why innovation theater is so negative, because it creates this feeling from leaders that we tried the innovation thing, we tried exactly what you said, but it actually didn't work. And so that's the problem.
Okay, and finally, coming back to the theme of pirates, you mentioned that not all pirates are the same, and you've done your historical research on this, Tendayi, and you come across the concept of privateers, who are, I suppose, licensed pirates, licensed on behalf of governments to go out and to raid and explore and to conquer. So in many ways, actually, that we really should be privateers in the Navy. Is that fair to say?
That's what it is. A pirate in the Navy is a privateer. That's pretty much what we're talking about. The fundamental question is, who beyond my team that I'm working with right now is interested in our idea? That's the innovators question inside a large one. Who else? what other important person is interested in my idea? So that's the distinction between pirates and the privateers. Pirates were just criminals. They used to roam the high seas. They were unattached to any nation or any institution. They were basically criminals. And if anybody caught them, they would be made to walk the plank. In contrast, privateers were pirates, but they were pirates that were attached to a specific country. And their goal was to go out into the world and raid the ships of enemy countries. And so when they came back with their loot, there was someone actually waiting to celebrate their success. And so the question for an entrepreneur is, who's waiting to celebrate your success, right? Who's waiting to say, oh, welcome back, Sir Francis Drake. We're going to give you a knighthood for the work that you've done raiding the Spanish fleets, right? So that's the question that it really innovators need to be asking themselves. It's always better to be a privateer in the Navy than a pirate, right?
Tendayi, that's excellent. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.